Tonight, a blockbuster from Silicon Valley. James Damore, the former Google engineer fired for blasting the company over its diversity policies, has filed a class action lawsuit against the company for allegedly discriminating against men, Caucasians, and conservatives. Damore's firing came after his controversial memo that claims women on average have more neuroticism and that Google should demoralize diversity. Joining us now in the Fox Business Exclusive is James Damore, along with his attorney, Harmeet Dhillon. James, thanks for joining us. This class action lawsuit that you filed comes after your very extensive memo, some are calling it actually a manifesto. And just to share with the audience some of the observations that you made with respect to women: an openness directed towards feeling and aesthetics rather than ideas. Extra vision expresses gregariousness rather than assertiveness. Also, neuroticism, higher anxiety, lower stress tolerance. And you suggest that perhaps these are trends from women that would explain why they haven't advanced as far in Silicon Valley and companies like Google?
Yeah, so I used the psychological literature to try to suggest ways that we could actually make Google a better place and more welcoming place for women. So right after that section, I have a whole page of different policies that we can enact to make Google a more welcoming place for women.
So then why was it interpreted then not as a memo to help women, but a memo that dissed women, that sort of argued that perhaps they weren't up to snuff with respect to the rigors of working in Silicon Valley at the upper echelons?
At least my interpretation is that they felt it was a challenge to the orthodoxy and it needed to be silenced, so they smeared me and anyone that supported me.
Well, there's no doubt that Silicon Valley has, over the last couple of years, admitted to some forms of discrimination, or at least some struggles and challenges when it comes to black, Hispanics, women, and others. So where do you think they differ with the root causes of this from your memo? In other words, they've admitted that there's an issue there, and it's an issue that you brought up. So it's sort of a universal admission that something is wrong in Silicon Valley, that there has to be changes, and that if they're not, and they've given it a lot of lip service. So why such an adverse reaction to your memo?
Because I offered a different perspective than the orthodoxy, which they said the only cause for the gender gap was sexism, while I said that it's well established in the psychological literature that men and women approach their careers differently, and that causes different interests in careers, like more women in teaching and nursing and more men in engineering.
That's a good.
It's not just discrimination.
Right, but that's a general observation. We're talking specifically with respect to Silicon Valley, though. Again, if women in your mind are on average have an openness directed towards feelings and aesthetics rather than ideas, so does that mean that they're disqualified for the upper echelons of the industry?
No, not at all. And Silicon Valley isn't unique in the gender gap. About 20% of computer science graduates are women, which matches the percent of women at Google. So it's not that Silicon Valley itself is toxic. It's just computer science appeals to different people. It doesn't appeal to most people in general, actually.
I think the argument, though, is the ability to climb up the ladder, right? We know when these companies check these lists off, it doesn't always include women in these fields that ultimately can become CEOs in these jobs or these titles that ultimately give them more decision-making power with respect to these companies. Again, they've all sort of admitted it. So the other part of your suit, discrimination against conservatives and white men. Explain that for us, please.
So there's continued harassment and career sabotage of anyone that expresses a conservative viewpoint. And there's constant shaming and attacks against white men within Silicon Valley. And this creates a really toxic environment at Google. And it's really hurting Google's employees, Google, and everyone that uses Google's products, because it seeps into their products.
So on that note, is that a reflection of the people who work there? We have a lot of people from foreign countries who work in Silicon Valley. I've read where over half the businesses being started there now are being started from folks who have arrived here from other countries. Are they bringing their prejudice with them against white conservatives, and has that hurt people's careers?
I think a lot of the prejudice is coming from just select activists that are really bullying everyone. It's not that everyone is biased against conservatives. If you look at the internal polls at Google, about half agreed with my document. But that's not what you would see if you just asked people openly, because there's just so much shaming that's happening. Because if you ever open up that you have certain viewpoints, then you'll be, your career will be sabotaged.
Harmeet, I want to ask you, this lawsuit, I think I read that it's a class action lawsuit. Do you anticipate additional workers joining James?
Well, let me speak to that, Charles. I mean, the situation is that we just filed this lawsuit today. It has 3 subclasses, and we absolutely expect other people to join the lawsuit. Now, several of the people's stories who are told in the lawsuit, their names are not used in the lawsuit because some of them still work at Google. Some of them would like to get jobs in Silicon Valley, and one of the main allegations in the lawsuit is that not only does this small cadre of extreme leftists that are running Google or managing Google not tolerate viewpoints like James's and other legitimate viewpoints, but they threaten people with career sabotage, like James said. They have maintained blacklists at Google of people that people refuse to work with. And they've also threatened James and many others with career termination by saying that they will make sure that they don't get jobs in Silicon Valley at all. So with that type of an atmosphere where they feel free to bully and shame and threaten people's careers like that, James really had no choice but to file this suit, and we do expect a lot of other people to hopefully come forward.
Harmeet and James, thank you both very much for coming on tonight.
My pleasure.
I should also let everyone know we did email Google for a statement. So far, we haven't heard back from them.